Afternoon again, colleagues. Good afternoon. Oh, it's still morning. Oh. Well, it feels like it should be afternoon. All right. Many thanks again for. All right. So just to Kevin. Okay. All right. So the agenda for this presentation will look at why this policy, this NZEB policy, why is it important? I'll also share with you the approach, the strategies. I'll give you the outcome that was, some of the outcomes that came from workshop 1, the aim and objective for this workshop, followed by an overview of the NZEB guidelines and also the guidelines for retrofitting. Now, the Build Better Jamaica project, which is promoting energy and efficiency and renewable energy in building in Jamaica, it addresses two key issues. Those issues are sustainable energy being one of them, efficient usage and utilization of renewable resources, and secondly, climate change mitigation and adaptation. So we want to see how we can construct our building to be more resilient and being able to adapt to different climatic elements. We have seen recently with the flooding and how vulnerable some of the developments are. So we have to look at the pressure points between policies, regulation, enforcement, and how we achieve the cohesive effort to make our new building and also our existing building more sustainable. The ISD recognized this and as a mission in addressing sustainability through this net zero energy project, and also we have seen where the positive outcome from the retrofitting that is taking place at the NHT head office, that is also part of one of the elements of this sustainability agenda and adaptation. Secondly, it is a partnership, like Heather mentioned earlier, between the JEF, UWI, and the United Nations. The objective is to promote and initiate the resilient and to facilitate the growth of the Jamaican building stock through these initiatives. All right, so just to give you an overview of where we're at in the policy process. So this is our proposed strategies for the development of this policy document. So we started off by doing pre-consultation with various stakeholders. So we did a stakeholder mapping and we look at entities that would help us to scope the elements of this policy plan. So we met with PIOJ, the Bureau of Standard, Ministry of Energy, and a number of other entities that provide input and explain to us what should be their priority, because it's what you find in government is that it's very difficult to get consensus from different agencies because of the way they operate. So one of the key things is that we didn't want to draft and develop a code that is not comfortable with all the stakeholders. So the stakeholder input was integral in forming and scoping this outline. So we have completed the pre-consultation, we have completed workshop number 1, and then we are now at workshop number 2, which with the objective to refine this guideline. So this guideline that you're seeing that is in your press kit, you feel free to review it, and again it's a summary document. Feel free to review it and provide your feedback via email or in the presentation in the afternoon session. So the aim and objective of this workshop is to refine and provide recommendation on that document. After which we will now present the final document via the website. And we have a phase 2 proposed where we're looking for the uptake from the government, because ideally what we want it to be is a subset of the national energy policy, Vision 2030. Ideally, that is the objective. So in phase 2, we're looking to action those items so that it can be adopted, right? And if you are aware of the various platforms that we promote on a daily basis, these initiatives through the Build Better Jamaica website and also the Facebook page. So the dissemination activities is ongoing, because what you find happening, a lot of people are still not aware. You talk NZEB, net zero, it is foreign to them. How do you translate into language that people can understand? The regular man, so they're not going to understand NZEB, but you tell them, listen, this policy will help you to save thousands of dollars in terms of operation costs. And once you talk energy, the first thing people tend to look at is solar. But energy efficiency is far more than solar. Yeah, it is as simple as your passive design strategies, how you orient your building. We in Jamaica, we tend to orient our building according to a boundary and try to conserve on space, which in essence sometimes is not necessarily ideal on an energy standpoint. So we have to look at the different passive design strategies, such as maximizing the natural ventilation, because again, we're in the tropics, and these are climatic elements that we can take advantage of. The building orientation, the landscape, again, landscaping, a lot of Jamaicans tend to overlook landscaping without understanding the value of inputting these features into the design. Recycling water, having a system in place that you can use after your treatment process of your waste. You can use that wastewater to irrigate, because in essence you don't need potable water for even flushing your toilet or watering your grass. So these are strategies that you can persuade stakeholders and people to say, listen, this is the reason, these are some of the reasons why it is important for us to look at these uptake for, again, a longer life. In terms of the building life cycle, we tend to look at the capital costs. How much is it going to cost us now to build, without understanding that capital cost is only roughly 25 to 30% of the overall costs. Operation and maintenance costs sometimes run in the region of 65 to 70%. So we have to look at promulgating these issues to the masses to get that buy-in into sustainable buildings and net zero energy building. Just to give a quick overview of some of the outcomes from workshop 1. So we looked at presenting the detailed goals and objectives of what the project is about. We also developed a conceptual framework that looked at situating the problem within the context, identifying the expected outcomes. So we had the goal, the vision, and the objectives. And in understanding the context, we looked at the international approach. What is happening with the sustainable development goals? Where does this fit into the overall agenda? Secondly, we look at the regional approach with some of the same projects that Dr. Gardner mentioned as it relates to the CISRMs, SIDDOC, CCRE, and those projects. We gave an outline, a summary of what the objectives of those projects are. Then we looked at the national approach, the energy efficiency building code, the waste to energy. So we give a overall summary of all of these policies and the outcome of such. Also, we looked at the gaps in current plans and policies, and we start by reviewing the various developmental orders, and the need to develop a comprehensive land use plan and spatial plan, which is currently absent. We looked at the absence of quantifiable renewable energy targets in a number of key policies. So even though you have these policies, there are a number of them that you cannot quantify the energy efficiency component. We also look at the need to develop and implement an integrated sustainable building energy efficiency program, new legislation that are required, and some amendments to the Building Code and Building Act. Now, just to give you a quick recommendations, some quick recommendations as some of the key outputs from workshop number 1, we provided a template for persons to fill out with their recommendations. Also, we looked at a schematic of the time frame. How long before, because in Jamaica we have to be realistic as it relates to achieving these policies and legislation, because it's not going to be abracadabra and then, there's these policies. So we have to look at the time frame, realistic time frame, as to when this development will take place. So will it be on a short-term basis, medium-term, 5 to 7 years, or on a long-term basis? Should it be immediate? So there are some issues and recommendations that are immediate and some that requires a longer process to implement. So we look at capacity building and we look at technical capacity building. One of such is to introduce environmental economic impact of NZEB construction and renewable energy building retrofit to assist with climate change adaptation. So a lot of persons, like I said earlier, tend to not understand the importance of net zero energy construction, renewable energy building. So we have to advocate for that sort of uptake. And some of those entities are the government of Jamaica. The government will have to lead by example, and I think this, again, with some of their programs and initiatives, is a good starting point for leading the charge for this engagement. Secondly, we have to look at the universities, the UTEC, the UWI, also the Hard Trust NTA, the TVET, because there's a gap in the industry where persons, some of us in here understand what energy efficiency is and the importance of energy efficiency, but one of the gaps is that our curriculum tend to not design around these issues. So even after you're trained, doing a 4 years degree program, you do a little component. So what you find happening is that afterwards, students, or as a professional, you tend to do developmental courses, which shouldn't be so. These issues should be designed around the curriculum so that when persons leave university, they are trained in the issues of renewable energy and sustainability. Right? So these are some things that we looked at. Also, stricter enforcement of physical planning laws and regulation. And we have seen this time and time again with even the most recent flooding, where there is no retreat code to say, listen, this, you should not build, you should be X away from water zone, water body, river banks, that sort of thing. So we need stricter enforcement in this regard, but it cannot be achieved by just writing. We need enforcement, we need the resources, the capital resources, the human resources to go out and ensure that these, and Minister Mackenzie mentioned it earlier, where they will increase the manpower to enforce these laws and regulation. We also looked at one of the recommendations again is for the establishment of a green building council, Jamaica Green Building Council, similar to what they have in the United States, LEED, or in the UK, BREEAM. So these are our benchmark bodies that we can look at, and they are well mature and developed in such a way that we can actually assess and develop our local entity to suit our local need. Right. We also looked at institutional capacity building, training and career development for sustainable building, which I mentioned earlier, through the various entities, strengthening the Met Office online database with real data, because architects and engineers, you know, and I speak for myself as an engineer, sometimes a lot of engineers do not have enough time to go to the Met Office and collect climate data and use into modeling software to get an optimum building that is energy efficiency and suit our microclimate, which, if you look what is happening now as it relates to sustainable building, that is where everybody is going in terms of energy modeling and simulation, and I'll explain further down in the presentation what I mean by that. But we need data that is available online that you can access readily. And I think the Water Resource Authority did a good job of that in terms of having all their maps and the different location of the water bodies, that sort of thing, available, so you can know where your depressions are, where your catchments are, those sort of things. So we have to build the capacity of the Met Office to include data like those. We looked at plans, policies, and legislation, but this is a summary, so in the document it will be far more detailed with all the recommendations that were outlined. Now, your role for this workshop basically is to review and provide recommendations for addition or omission of different areas of the guide. So you have a summary of guidelines that look at NZEB development and also an overall guideline for retrofitting for energy efficiency in Jamaica. So you can look at the different aspects, and I've also provided you with the stages, the various stages of energy efficiency retrofit. So you can now, based on the process and based on your experience, provide us with some insight as to either step, what come before or what comes after, or areas that we can review for before the document is published. The guiding principles that have been applied to develop the net zero energy building are outlined below, and you have two main objectives. The premise is grounded in technologies that minimize the overall impact by encouraging energy efficient building design, reducing transportation loss and conversion loss. So what this is basically saying is that with net zero energy building, it is good for us to have for the energy source that is readily available, even years to come. And one of, a few of those sources are solar. We tend to underuse solar and the fact that we're in the tropics and we experience sun right through the year. We need to take advantage of this resource. Also, we have wind and we have other form of renewable energy sources. Secondly, technologies that will be available over the life of the building and are widely available with high replication potential. So again, we mentioned the wind and the solar. As long as there is sun, you will have power. And that is the mindset we have to adopt. The guiding principles, we have 5 guiding principles. One is to improve the overall economic efficiency of net zero energy building. So we have to create a business case for this. Also direct the design team towards the idea of net zero energy building. Ensure there is quality. Observe the principle of net zero energy from the beginning. And I'll show you a graphic that explains exactly what I mean by that. And the social aspect. Right? So the overall goal is to look at the building, the systems, and the occupants. And you have to achieve net zero energy building, you have to look at building modeling between the systems, the occupants, and the building. Also, a lot of people tend to forget that the building is designed for your occupants. And in some entity, they'll tell you, oh, the AC is for the computers, which shouldn't be the case. You are designing a building for the occupants, so the occupant requirement is essential. And once you perform all of these activities, then you'll have a framework and goals that are aligned with the net zero energy building goal. And this is an example of what I was talking about earlier. We're in the pre-construction phase. The decision to change the design is less. But when you start your construction, the cost to influence the economic efficiency will increase. So if it is that you're going to design a building and you want it to be energy efficient or to be of a net zero energy standard, you have to start from the pre-construction phase, the design phase, to pull together your team, integrate the different professionals to get a suitable outcome. The utilization phase, now that is critical. You find that it's very difficult to achieve any change once the construction is done, and it will cost a lot, right? So the cost increase down as you move along to the utilization phase. Now, for this recommended guidelines, we look at 3 phases. Phase 1, the pre-construction phase, construction phase, and the operating and maintenance of the net zero energy building. In the pre-construction phase, we looked at different elements, and it is more detailed in your summary document. I just pull aspect of it just to give you an outline of what is required. So the planning principle for the design of net zero energy building, we have to look at the space requirements. So the area and space requirements established by the client should be critically reviewed in terms of their real need and appropriateness, and in particular for any likely over provision. So in a lot of situations, you have the clients make a certain request, but the designer oblige with the client, but you sometimes have to make from an informed standpoint that, listen, this can be much smaller when you take into consideration the operation and maintenance costs, because there is no, like a single family having a house that is 6-7 bedroom. Yes, it looks good, but economically it will be costly to maintain and operate. So you have to recommend from an expert standpoint, why is it important to reduce the size or the footprint of certain requests? Because you, at the end of the day, will maintain it. And the bigger the space, the more space it is to maintain. Right? In the construction phase, we look at durability. Low maintenance costs is to be aimed for. So materials that are less, have very good indoor air quality and are less costly to maintain. For example, now they have a number of technologies. Back in the days, they used to use the paint. Now with shower lawn, they're using other technologies that require less maintenance than normal. All right. And phase 3, which is the operation and maintenance of NZEB, we looked at health, protection, and comfort in net zero energy building. So, like I mentioned before, constructing a building, you're doing it for the people, and there are a number of elements that determine how comfortable they are within the building. So, for example, the indoor air quality, the thermal comfort, the AC, the wind speed. These are parameters that you have to look at. And I must add, it is very difficult for you to get everybody comfortable. But what you strive for is some sort of consensus. And the code, again, speaks to that. Right? And thermal comfort is that condition of mind that express satisfaction with the thermal environment. So, for example, if you're designing a building for a school building, your parameters would be different than if you're designing a gym, because when you're designing a gym, the activities will be up, the clothing insulation will be different. So these are all parameters that you have to look at. And the BSJ application code, which should work in tandem with this proposal, talks about the different elements. And this was adapted from the ASHRAE, American Society of Heating, Refrigerating and Air Conditioning Engineers. So the PMV, this is the perceived mean value for your occupants. So it's, like I said, it's important to get 100% comfortable, but if you get 85%, then that would be good. Right? So those are things that you look at. Right? And just to give you an overview of the building retrofit, you have a number of barriers. Those include the financial barrier, lack of funding. Building owners or consumers do not have access to sufficient funding. So we have to provide that ability to be able to access these funding. I know now that the DBJ have access, give you access to funding for energy audits and so forth, but how many persons know about that facility? So we have to promulgate that. Upfront costs and payback expectation. Dr. Gardner mentioned where you're buying energy saving equipment and the last, the life cycle is not what is expected. So those are things that people fear. Priorities in terms of investment. This is not needed now. Probably in the future, but no, it's not a priority. Also, we have the regulatory barriers, multi-stakeholder issues, and in addition to that, we have to use the government as the change agent, leading by example, and then you have the social barrier, the discomfort where persons tend to be uncomfortable when it's construction. While I was working in the private sector and as a project manager, and you find that you're renovating a space over a weekend because you try to do it when there is less occupancy. And Monday morning, if they come and find a dust, you'll hear it. And even with the paint, if they come and smell paint, yeah, but you have to be mindful of these things. So people tend not to like the discomfort of renovating and retrofitting. So you have to now find a strategy that appeals to the occupants of the building and to say, hey, this is how we'll do it. We'll do it in phases. And then you achieve that. All right, so I have a minute just to give you an overview of the guidelines for retrofit. First, you have to understand the building and the site, the different climatic elements and characteristics that are involved. Secondly, you have to develop a clear project statement, document and assess these elements, review the project requirements, balance all the project goals and objectives, and you have to do continuous evaluation to ensure that based on your success criteria, all the elements are in sync, right? And then you recommend your interventions. And these slides basically just explain in brief what these elements are talking about. So this presentation will be available on the Build Better website, or before you leave, you can actually come over and I'll provide you with a copy. All right? All right. So your objective now and your role. If you were at the last workshop, you would be familiar with the procedure, but is similar outcome that we want. I think the last workshop, it went very well in terms of the feedback and the recommendations, which I think were quite resourceful. Now, in this workshop is a similar situation where you review the document, and from each table in the afternoon session, you select a representative to come and present on your behalf. So ensure that all the inputs, based on the revision, the brainstorming, the discussion, the passionate discussion, your input is represented and presented in the afternoon session. So that's it. All right. Thank you.